Hello, my name is Pavel Bure and I'm presenting immigration from Russia to America. Russia is a gigantic country and the biggest. It has a very diverse population, almost as diverse as America, if not more. Because of its diversity, it's hard to measure the amount of Russians that immigrated to the US, but we can still measure the amount of Russian-speaking people that did. The amount of Russian-speaking people that immigrated to the US during the two waves between 1820 and 1922 was about 102 million. But there were still many waves of immigrants after 1922, such as the end of World War II, fall of the Soviet Union, and other major events that pushed Russian immigrants away. Russia affected the US long before it was even called that. At the time, even Russia wasn't a country. During the last ice age, many people migrated over the Bering Strait while it was frozen over and settled all over America, including South America and Canada. Many years later, many Russians came over the Bering Strait on ships to Alaska and started logging and mining companies. Several years before the collapse of the Russian Empire and the beginning of the Soviet Union, there was World War I, during which many people immigrated to the US, not just Russians. Nikolai II, the emperor at the time, was having many family issues, let alone the World War. His son was dying and no one could help. He went to the front to help his soldiers fight, leaving his wife in charge. Many Russian people did not trust her because she was a German. Germany used this situation to free up troops on the front with Russia by sending Lenin to Russia by train to cause civil disturbance, which ultimately ended up with the imperial family being killed and a revolution. My great-grandfather, who was the second right-hand man to the king and the general of the imperial guard, was also killed. Luckily, his daughter, my grandmother, and her mother escaped to Siberia before he was killed and moved back to St. Petersburg in 1921. Because of the revolution, many Russians immigrated to the US. It was quite possibly one of the largest waves of Russian immigration. Not only poor Russians immigrated, because they weren't the only ones that were hunted. The bourgeoisie and high-ranking officers of the military were also being hunted by the Reds, so they fled. Many of them had trouble finding jobs, so they took whatever jobs they could get. However, over time they reacquired their previous zeal and got back to being scientists, engineers, school teachers, and other well-paid jobs. Some historians would call that the push-pull effect, where one side, Russia, pushes citizens away with no food and war, and America pulling the immigrants to itself with promise of jobs and peace. A lot of Americans did not like Russians, along with other immigrants. Russians were often accused of being rowdy and drunks and always ready to pick a fight, which in some cases is true, but not for the majority. Russians affected America in a lot of ways, in some cases more than any other country. For an example, Igor Sikorsky immigrated over in 1920 and started the Sikorsky Company, which is now the leading supplier of helicopters to the US military. When he started the company, he took loans from Rachmaninoff, who was also living in the US. Also, the New York Ballet Company, which now supplies Broadway with a lot of their actors, was started by a Russian immigrant called George Balanchine in 1948. After World War II, many Russian scientists and engineers also immigrated, further advancing America's technology and enriching its super diverse culture. Many of the immigrants settled close to each other and formed communities. Today, one of the most popular ones is in Brighton, New York, and it's nicknamed Little Russia by the Sea. Russians settled in coastal areas like New York, Pennsylvania, Florida, and California. In conclusion, without Russians immigrating to the US, maybe even the first colonists may not have survived, and there could be no America.